are coming. It's the El Camino, of course. It's not going to end as Nick wants it. Um, Alicia battles walkers on the hill, but she manages to attach the cable to the SWAT truck. Of course she does. But before that, Strand presses the gas on the toe, and the SWAT truck budges. Of course. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Morgan finds Ennis and warns him to leave. Of course. Nick appears with a hammer. Let's not forget. And Ennis says he didn't think he'd ever see him again. Of course, Nick runs towards him in a rage. Morgan stops him. There's a flashback. Nick tells Madison he stays inside the diamond because of what being outside does to him. Boom, back to the present again. Morgan lets Nick go, and he rushes Ennis again with the hammer. They wrestle until Nick throws him on, he pushes him onto those antler horns, and of course kills him. Morgan returns, why he was walking, I don't know, but from a brief walk, and to find Nick with his hands covered in blood. Morgan proceeds to tell him about the people he lost and how Eastman taught him that all life was precious. You all remember Eastman, right? He hands Nick his book on peace and encourages him to read it. The rest of the group arrives in the SWAT truck, of course, and Nick flashes back again. This time, Madison takes him to a field full of blue bonnet flowers he found earlier in the day. Boom, back to the present again. Nick finally, literally, looks at the flowers when he hears a gunshot. He feels blood and then the gunshot wound in his chest. He looks up to see Charlie with a gun pointed at him. He falls sideways as blood flows out his mouth. Alicia and the others sprint towards him, and they try and stop the bleeding. But it's way too late. Nick dies as the rest of them sob and stare at him in disbelief. No! And we conclude with a flashback to him laying in a field of the blue bonnets. Shocker, right? Who expected that? Charlie! See what I mean about these kids? They're freaking creepy, and I don't even trust them. I think this shocked everybody because that's all you heard was, I'm done with fear. I am done. It's crazy. It was a surprising death. One of the surprising deaths in the Walking Dead franchise's history. Of course, fans speculated since the season 4 premiere, Madison might be dead, of course, in the series' present-day timeline. We don't know. But as the season goes back and forth between flashbacks and reality, we still haven't seen a peek of Madison outside of the flashbacks. Sunday, of course, did not unveil Madison's death. Instead, it was Nick, whose sudden demise, of course, came out of shock. And there was no hints that this was going to happen or he may, dying anytime soon, which made it more painful for fear watchers, of course. And he expired as he started to realize anyway, that violence will only beget more violence. Of course, like I've been saying, there have been clear parallels between this and Carl's death, too. The difference, of course, many fans were betting Carl was a goner before he died, and, of course, that flashed forward to a devastated Rick. But Nick's death, the way it was written, it kind of expressed the most tragic reality of the apocalypse. Death isn't doled out deliberately when people are ready to leave, or they've learned their big lesson, so to speak, okay? Or after they have learned. Sometimes it happens when a character's journey is just starting to begin. Fear has once again achieved something its predecessor could not. Fear loves an unexpected death. This is, one of the trademarks of what makes it different than The Walking Dead. It gives this spin-off a dangerous streak. And a slightly less cynical type thing going on. This week's episode was very poetic. Blue bonnets serve as a motif for hope. And of course, in the flashbacks, Madison points to the flower's presence as a sign there's still good in this world. But so far, we haven't seen anything good come of flowers, have we? An emotion was so when he comes across this patch of blue bonnets, he stops to pick one. Of course, right before killing a vulture, but okay. He's filled with rage, and Morgan did try to tell him that it's not too late to find his own peaceful path, and to learn, as he did, that all life is precious. Unfortunately, this is when he sits down to read that book. And he holds the flower that he picked earlier. Gunfire pierces the air, and blood from the man he's just killed mingles with Nick's own. And there's Charlie standing there with a gun pointed out. Of all people, where did this kid go? Why did they not see this kid coming? I'm at a loss here for that. She just basically pointed at him and shot. Why did they not see her? She's a little girl who's also a vulture, so beware of the children in these in The Walking Dead and Fear, apparently, okay? As he dies, blood gushes from his mouth the same way it gushed from the mouth of the vulture that he had just killed. So, and of course, both series are designed to continue on and on. They swap characters in and out. But the apocalyptic backdrop really gives this material a weight of tragedy that you don't feel with other shows. It's hard to make so much death and tragedy meaningful, but it does. It really does. It just goes to show you just don't know what's going to happen. You can't plan that, you're going to live forever, right? You're going to live through this because you just don't know what's going to happen. So, again, what the hell, Fear? I think everybody was like in total shock over this death. But rumors have it that he has other things he's pursuing, so he kind of wanted out of his contract. So if that makes you feel better, I hope it does. He wants to move on, basically. So again, the Clarks have now lost half their family. The families they've met and traveled with are all pretty much dead, of course. Is total destruction the end game in this one? Is all that viewers have to look forward to is a moment when literally everyone is gone, or one lone survivor is seen walking into the sunset? Would even a moment of hope as survivors create a thriving community be a satisfying conclusion after watching so many hopeful settlements crumble? A lot of questions that make Nick's death, as beautifully rendered as it was, a little fraught, But after many seasons of gushing blood, crying families, and ruined would-be societies, it's growing more and more difficult to imagine, a happy ending to all this. But you have, there's a lot of parallels. As soon as, it was a Nick Shane moment to me, a Rick Shane moment, in some of it. But all in all, it was a good episode, I thought. Other than the shocking death of Nick, that was something nobody saw coming. What a twist. But he's going to be pursuing other things, so we'll see him again. It just makes you wonder what's to come. And poor Morgan, again, he, tried to help somebody. And poor Morgan, it didn't work out again. So what did you guys think? Anybody out there listening? Tell me what you thought of this episode. Some character deaths are a good thing for the show. They reach the end of their story, basically. So sometimes it's just bad luck, but it does work. Apparently, I think his death was handled pretty well. It was quick and sudden, but totally tragic. Of course it was. Nobody saw this coming. But Nick's story didn't come to any real good, satisfying conclusion in all this. His character was not totally explored, I don't think. And of course, maybe a meaningful relationship with Morgan. It was hinting at that pretty much, and I really thought those two were going to maybe become, they had a good chemistry going. So interesting, right? I just really I thought it was a good episode, except for that. I was, what? Excuse me. Yeah, I did not expect that, and I don't think anybody else did from what I saw. So, as we mourn Nick's death, he's going on to bigger and better things, probably. So, but, the show goes on, so we have next week to look forward to. We'll see what happens. Poor Morgan, though, because when he loses somebody, he loses himself. So now what's going to happen to him? He lost Nick. They had a good chemistry going. I think it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if Nick hadn't been killed off. But unfortunately, we're not going to see that. But, yeah, it's just sad. So sad. But I hope everybody's getting over it and ready to see what happens next. Charlie. I just can't get over these kids in these shows. They are brutal, actually. Lizzie and Charlie could, they could have been sisters, right? I mean, seriously. Like I said, any more kids in these shows, don't trust them. Absolutely not. So, let me know what you thought of this episode. That kind of wraps it up for that. I don't know what else we can say. R.I.P. Nick Clark. So, we'll see you soon in other things. So, anyway, that wraps it up. I think we kind of talked about it enough. Let's see. Oh, I also wanted to bring up, the death of Harry Anderson. That was a bit bizarre. And a couple other deaths. Arlie Ermy. So rest in peace. He apparently he just passed recently, and it was complications with pneumonia, unfortunately. And unfortunately, that's been going on all flu season, unfortunately. So R.I.P. Lee Ermy. Harry Anderson, who was found in his apartment.